Hello everyone, I am Rod and I am the game design instructor for the Academy of Entertainment Arts over at Dixie Hollins High School. If you are one of my students, it's Mr. Flowers to you, and welcome to this video tutorial. Alright, good evening. What I want to go over today is how to make a basic door and a frame, and so you can use it inside of a game engine or for any other project. So real quick, I'm going to grab a cube. And we're working with the assumption that y is up, x is our left and right, and z is our front. Okay, so when you're working in your projects, just remember that inside of Maya, z is your front and back, your depth basically, and x is your left and right, y is your up and down. So what we're going to need to do is figure the size of our door. Inside of the Unreal Engine, a person is about 180 plus centimeters tall. So I'm going to make the door a little bit bigger than that. It'll be 210 tall. Width is about 3 feet, so that'd be 96 centimeters. I'm going to do 120 just to make it a little bit bigger. And there's a basic door shape. That's pretty much it. I chose a depth of 8 just to kind of give it some thickness here. But really that's all there is to making a door as far as the general shape is concerned. If you want to do like a doorknob or a handle, you can always add those on. In my y-axis, I'm going to pull this thing up about half its height. That'll be 105. That way it's on the grid. And now I'm going to make the door frame. So Control D will duplicate. R on the keyboard so that I can expand this thing out a little bit, and I will hit and I will hit 4 on the keyboard to bring in wireframe. Front view. And what I'm going to do is add in some edge loops. I'm going to cut the shape of the door into the frame and then delete the faces that kind of occur. So Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. I'm going to drop an edge loop about there. So I have 3. 1 slice, 2 slice, 3 slices. Q to get rid of my tool, F9 to go into vertex mode, and I will grab these vertices here, at the bottom. And it wouldn't be a good door frame if it sunk into the ground. In this case, I'm going to hold X on the keyboard, and I will pull up, snap it to the grid. I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to grab these, snap those to this grid line where the top of the door is. This group right here is going to snap to this blue line here, the dark blue, and this one to here. Okay. Now your door frame can be as thick or as thin as you like. In this case, it's a little thin, but I'm going to go 5 grid spaces. Now my grid, if your grid does not look like mine, display, if I go to grid, mine is set up as 512, 96, 32, just in case you want to match my grid. And I'm going to pull this out 5 grid spaces. You don't have to be exact. I just like to have things so they snap nice and even. 5 grid spaces. And then up top here, same deal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want this one to be 5 grid spaces. So there's the basic shape of our frame, and what we're going to do is I'm going to go back into shaded mode, F11 so that I can grab the face. I'm going to grab this face, the back face, whoops, and then the bottom face. And that's holding Shift on the keyboard as I'm selecting them to grab multiples, and I will delete those off. Hit Q to get rid of my little tool there. I'm going to go back into object mode. I'm going to select my door. I'm going to go ahead and give it a name, SM_door. The SM is for static mesh, so if you're working with skeletal meshes or whatever, you have it labeled. So I'm just going to pull this away. And now I have my frame here. Go ahead and name this guy SM_door frame. And you can see, since we cut out those faces, that we have these holes here. And if you're going into a game engine, you don't really want to have open geometry. Some of the older engines that cause problems in Unreal Engine 4, this will read as transparent because the backside of a face will show up as invisible. So you'll have some issues with that. So what we're going to do is fill these in. If you have this selected, go up to Mesh Tools, Append to Polygon. And what this will let us do is just fill the hole with a face. So I'm going to select the edge that I want to fix, and then connect it to the edge that needs to be filled. And there we go. If you hit Y on the keyboard, it'll reset the tool. And you can continue. I'm going to grab this one. Now, be aware that when you have this tool selected, if you click off somewhere, if you miss, you'll get this weird goofy piece. And it does not always let you use Control-Delete or Control-Z because the tool's active, so it doesn't want you to mess it up. What you have to do is hit Enter and then Control-Z. Okay. Grab that. I lost my tool. And now I will grab this one. Now you can see that these faces are a little bit dark, and the reason for that is the way when we made these, the normal that appeared is telling the light that this is a rounded surface, but it's not a rounded surface. So we're going to make this set to the face. That way it looks like this. So if you go up to Mesh Display, Set to Face, it's going to fix the face normals. And there they go. Yay. Alright. Now before we bring this over into a game engine, I'm going to go ahead and set up the UVs. That way we can paint these doors and get them ready for export. So, I think I'll do a handle for my door frame just to be different. Let's pull this up, set my frame back, grab my door, and I think I'll use a cylinder for my handle. So Polygon primitives, I'm going to grab a cylinder. And I don't know exactly how big I want this cylinder to be. I'm just going to kind of visually inspect. So radius, looks good enough. So that's 6.4. Height, that'll work. Now, since this is, a door, you can do this a couple ways. You can make one doorknob and place it on both sides. Or, because we're not going to be seeing through this door, we could just create a cylinder and your piece for your handle and then just kind of push it through. I'm not going to round off. I'm not going to make like a dome kind of door handle. I'm just going to, because I really don't want to do any sewing, I'm just going to use an extrusion technique. So my subdivisions in height, I'm going to make that 3. And that'll give me these little slices here. What this will let me do is I'm going to face mode. So that's F11. I'm going to select this face, hold Shift, double click, select this face, hold Shift, double click, hit R on the keyboard. I will, whoops. Actually, that's not going to come out the way that I wanted. With these selected, I'll go ahead and extrude them. So let's go to Polygons, use the Extrude tool. And remember, if we're extruding and we're trying to pull these directly out from the model, we want to use the Z-axis. So let's go ahead and pull these out. And there's a basic round kind of doorknob kind of thing going on. I'm going to right click, go into object mode. And I will take the edges here on the caps, grab that one, and I'll do the same thing on the bottom, Shift, double click, and this will give it a bit of a rounded look. If I bring up my scaling tool, so R on the keyboard, and then I'll just grab this and scale it. And you can see that gives it that beveled look. I'm not going to go crazy about these triangles here. On the caps of this particular cylinder, it's not going to be that big of a deal because I'm not creating an edge loop here. I don't have to make any cuts. So, but if they bug you, you could come through and remove them. I think I'll leave it alone for now. But I do need to make this taller. So what I'm going to do, come into my front view. I'm going to select all these, and I'm going to just move them up a few grid spaces. That's probably good enough. Now that I stretched that the way that I did, the pivot's not center. So I'm going to go up to Modify, Center the Pivot, right here. Now I can put this, I should be able to put this in the door and it look fairly natural. So I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees in the X. Kind of looks like a dumbbell. Go in my top view. I'll take my doorknob and center it up. If you need to see the wireframe, that's 4 on the keyboard. And I will hold X and just kind of snap this dead center. Go to my front view, and I'll pull this up to about where a doorknob probably would be. It is kind of large. Like the depth of it isn't bad, but the radius is a little high. So what I'm going to do is in my scale value, I'm going to reduce the X and the Y, but I'll keep the Z the same. So the X value, I'm going to make it 0.5. The Y value, I'll make 0.5. Whoops. Sorry. Not bad. I'll do the Z because I rotated it. That should work. I wonder if I flatten these off at the ends. If we rounded it, that's how it would look. Alright, good enough. Now to make these one solid piece, I will select the doorknob and this shape here. And I will go to, actually I take that back. I want to do my UVs first. I'll grab the door, go up to UV, and I'll go down to automatic. and this will just take a picture of my UVs for me. Remember, automatic is good for solid things, or not really good for organic things. And over here on my layout, I'm going to hit this little dark picture thing to get rid of that fuzzy background so I can see what I'm doing. We need to sew this together. So I'm going to grab the face, because when the UV layout is done automatically, there are some bad spots in it where there's going to be a seam, and we want to minimize all the possible seams that we can. I'm going to grab this edge. I'm in edge mode right now, so that's right click, go to edge mode. Select the edge, it'll highlight the two edges that meet. Polygons, move and sew. I will grab the other edge, this back one. Hold on a second. Go into UVs, double click, move this back out. Edge mode. I'm going to connect this edge to these two. What it'll do is it'll flip this. Polygons, move and sew. This edge lines up with that. Polygons, move and sew. I'll get the top edge, polygons, move and sew, and then the bottom edge, polygons, move and sew. And what that does is, if you look at this like a cardboard box that was unfolded and opened up, we have our primary face, the front of the door. We have the edge piece of the door right here, the top edge, the bottom edge, and then the center edge, and then this kind of folds around to the back, and the back closes up. So if you think of this as kind of folding around this way, is how that works. And it'll be pretty seamless with the exception of like right on this seam, but for the rest of it, the part that's going to open and face the player, we won't have any seams, which is good. So I have that piece. Let me grab the doorknob. And the doorknob is pretty much laid out for us. Just want to double check, because it looks like it did not get all of them. So I'm going to grab this. So go to UVs, I'm going to select all this. Then I'm going to hit unfold. And there we go. Move this out of the way. These are the end pieces. And this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both the door and the handle now. This one and this one. Polygons, we'll do a layout. And it's going to kind of cram everything on here. But I want the handle to be smaller than the actual door. So what I'm going to do is manually size these. Grab this, this, and this. Pull them off. I'll grab the shell. I'm going to rotate this because I want my door to be standing up. Put it right in the middle. Hit R on the keyboard to scale it, and I'm just going to center scale until I'm happy with the size of the door. Move it down. Since my door is the biggest piece of geometry that's going to be seen the most, I want to have the most coverage as far as the texture is concerned. I want to have the most detail here. The handle, half of this we're not even going to see because some of it protrudes to the door. We could eliminate all the center pieces. So if I come in here and I look, pretty much everything in the center that is not part of the actual doorknob, we could probably cut away. The only reason I'm not is this is a solid piece and it's kind of hidden in here. But I'm just going to leave that be. This piece, I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. Scale it down. Actually, I'm going to scale these at the same time so that they retain the same shell space. this here. And that'll work for our doors layout. So now we can take this into Photoshop and paint it. Okay. So UVs, I'm going to select all of these. And to bring this into Photoshop, we can go to Polygons, UV Snapshot. Make sure that we save this out. I already have one out there. Let me see, I'll name it something else. Let's say door 2 UVs. My size is going to be 2048, but this just depends on your computer, whatever your computer's happy with rendering. But this is a good size to get a lot of detail. And then PNG, hit OK. So now I can combine these, select them both, hit the Combine tool. So there's that. Then I will grab the door frame and I'll do the same thing. UVs, I'll do an automatic. And I'm just going to grab this shell here. I just went to UVs and double click the shell. Pull this up. And same thing, I'm going to hit edge mode. So these two edges move and so. This edge to this edge. Polygons move and so. And how I know where to sew these, just I'm visualizing this as a box that has been cut and it's just folding over itself. So basically I'm cutting it on this edge and opening it this way. So let's see, where else can I go? This top piece, polygons, we'll do a move and sew. I missed something. When I do that, I have this edge here. So I want to make sure that I get that edge. Polygons, move and sew. I missed that edge over there. Make sure we have all three. 1, 2, 3. Polygons, move and sew. There we go. This edge I can do. Polygons, move and sew. Does this one have a top? This one sews to there, so I will not use that one. These two sew back together. But I have this internal edge, so I will grab this guy. Polygons, move and sew. And you just want to be careful that when you do these internal edges that you're not overlapping anything. If you are, there'd be a problem, but that's okay that this is not going to have any issues. This one, when I sew this, will overlap that, so we have to be careful. Polygons, move and sew. See how it overlaps? I'm going to grab this corner piece, and you see how these two highlight? That means they're going to go together. And I'm going to do a polygon, move and sew, and it'll kind of do that. I'm not as worried about these being skewed inside of here as I am about the rest of it. So grab this one. Polygons, we'll do a move and sew. Grab that corner, sew that again. And it does bend them just a bit, but this is going to be on the inner edge and we're not going to see it as much as we would see this face. So it's not as important. and then this bottom piece, and I'll do this bottom one as well at the same time just to save on time. Polygons, move and so. And there we go. We have our door frame. Go UVs, select the whole thing, and then hit layout, and it'll drop it on here. And again, if you don't like the way the layout is, like if it turns it sideways, you can just rotate it back and then manually center it up. You just want to make sure that your UVs are not outside of the boundary. So this gray shell, your 0, 1 space, basically, this one, is the only space we should be using. So just make sure nothing is outside of it. Otherwise you might get clipping, or you might get bending or twisting or warping or some weird anomalous effect. So there's that. And again, we can do a UV snapshot so we can paint this in Photoshop. So UVs, Polygons, UV snapshot. I'm going to do this as door frame. Door frame UVs. Hit OK. And we'll do the texture in a different video just to save time. I think we're already at 20 minutes. I want to show you how to set these up for export. So before I export them, I'm going to get rid of all of these modifications. So edit, delete by type. We do non-deformer history. Edit, delete by type. Non-deformer. And we need to set up the pivot points because right now, this being a standard door, its pivot point is in the center, and that's not good. We also want to make sure that before we export this, that it is also on the center origin. So our origin point is where this crisscross is, this big black cross. Right there is 0, 0 on our grid. It's important to know that the 0, 0 or the origin point on the grid is not always the same as the origin point on this door, and I'll show you that by doing this. If I put my door here on the grid and then I go up to modify and I hit freeze transformations, it's going to tell my door that where it currently exists is 0, 0. But that's not true. Our origin point is right here. Okay? So if I move my door to the origin point, it's going to tell me that it has moved 100 points or 100 units in the z-axis. So you want to make sure that you're actually on the origin. You're not on what the object is telling you, because what the object is telling you is not always true. So if this object is sitting here, when I export it into another engine, it's going to get these coordinates kind of messed up, and your origin point, or your this little point of access here, your widget, is going to end up in the center, where your door is going to be floating kind of off, and that's not going to work. So you want to make sure that this is centered. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to hit modify, I'm going to do center pivot, and then I'm going to put my door at the origin manually. I'm going to hold X on the keyboard, and I'm just going to drag it over till it's center. And I can visually inspect that by going in my top view and seeing that my pivot point is directly in the center of the grid. So with that centered, I can now modify my pivot point so that my door will swing the appropriate way. Currently, if I right-click and just a second. Currently, if I right-click, just a second. Sorry. Okay. Currently, if I bring up my pivot point and I go to rotate this, it's going to rotate along a center axis, and that's not good for a standard door. What we need to do is move this to the bottom corner, but after we move the pivot point, we'll have to move the door so that the pivot point lines up on the center axis. So I'm going to push Insert on the keyboard. That'll allow me to move my pivot. If I grab the center of the pivot and hold V, I can snap it directly to a vertex. And I'm going to grab my bottom left vertex here. Now that it's centered on that vertex, I will hold X on the keyboard and just drag this little blue arrow so it snaps to the grid line right there. So it is centered on the grid for this particular axis, and it is centered on the door. I'll hit Insert to get rid of that. Bring up my Move tool, which is W. And now I have to manually move the entire door so that the pivot is on the center axis. So hold X and move it to the center axis. If we don't do this, what will happen is when we bake this out to go to Unreal, Unreal will assume that we wanted our pivot point to be centered, and it will center it for us. If we put the doorway over here, the door will be there, but the pivot point will be there, and our door will orbit the point. We don't want that. So we want this to be right there. And if you're like me and you want to make sure that this is always at origin, once we have it centered, we can always go up to our Modify and hit Freeze Transformations, and that will cancel everything out and make this 0, 0 at the origin, which is handy. Same thing for our door frame. Even though our door frame does not move, we want this so that it is going to hit the grid and line up with our door. So I'm going to move this guy back to the origin, and then I'm going to modify the pivot. So Insert lets me modify my pivot, and I'm going to snap this down. So hover over the center of my pivot point, hold V, and then snap this to there. Zoom in, hold X on the keyboard, bring it to the center of the grid line. That way they both are in basically the same location. And I will move this I'm actually going to move this a little in. So Insert, hold X, and I will bring this to there. My only reason for doing that is to ensure that it is on the edge of my door. You don't have to kind of go through that. That's just me being OCD. It's fine being on the outside, because this piece does not move. Okay, so that's making a basic door. Next thing we have to do, if we're using the OBJ export, is we have to rotate these. When we start using the FBX exporter, we won't have to do the rotation as much. It'll figure that out on its own, but we're not using FBX at the moment. We're going to use the OBJ exporter. So Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager. And the reason I'm not using the FBX export as opposed to the other is I don't like the way it looks. Every time I use the FBX export, my textures get really ugly. And that's the only reason why I don't like using it, unless it's like an animated piece. So we want to come down to where it says objexport.mil and make sure it's loaded and auto load. Hit close. And we can select our door, File. We will go to Export Selection. And I don't have a project folder for this made up yet, so I'm just going to drop it in here for now. It's going to be sm_door. And make sure we have OBJ export. If you don't see it, just make sure that you scroll down to the bottom of the list. And then Export Selection. I'm going to grab the door frame, do the same thing. File, export selection, sm_door frame, obj export, export selection. And there we go. If we drag these into Unreal, we'll have a door that is useful. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to do the texture for the door, and then we will animate the door inside of the Unreal Engine 4.